Chapter 23 of the Egoist. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. The Egoist, a comedy in narrative by George Meredith. Chapter 23. Treats of the union of temper and policy. Sir Willoughby meanwhile was on a line of conduct suiting his appreciation of his duty to himself. He had deluded himself with the simple notion that good fruit would come of the union of temper and policy. No delusion is older, none apparently so promising, both parties being eager for the alliance. Yet the theorist upon human nature will say, they are obviously of adverse disposition. And this is true, inasmuch as neither of them will submit to the joke of an established union. As soon as they have done their mischief, they set to work tugging for a divorce. But they have attractions, the one for the other, which precipitate them to embrace whenever they meet in a breast. Each is earnest with the owner of it to get him to officiate forthwith as wedding priest. And here is the reason. Temper, to warrant its appearance, desires to be thought as deliberately as policy, and policy, the sooner to prove its shrewdness, is impatient for the quick blood of temper. It will be well for men to resolve at the first approaches of the amorous but fickle pair upon interdicting even an accidental temporary junction. For the astonishing sweetness of the couple, when no more than the ghosts of them have come together in a projecting mind, is an intoxication beyond fermented grape juice or a witch's brewage. And under the guise of active wits, they will lead us to the parental meditation of antics, compared with which a pagan Saturnalia were less impious in the sight of sanity. This is full-mouthed language. But on our studious way through any human career, we are subject to fits of moral elevation. The theme inspires it, and the sage residing in every civilized bosom approves it. Decide at the outset that temper is fatal to policy. Hold them with both hands in division. One might add, be doubtful of your policy, and repress your temper. It would be to suppose you wise. You can, however, by incorporating 2 or 3 captains of the great army of truisms, bequeathed to us by ancient wisdom, fix in your service those veteran old standfasts to check you. They will not be serviceless in their admonitions to your understanding, and they will so contrive to reconcile with it the natural caperings of the wayward young sprig conduct, that the latter, who commonly learns to walk upright and straight from nothing softer than raps of a bludgeon on his crown, shall foot soberly, appearing at least weary of dangerous corners. Now Willoughby had not to be taught that temper is fatal to policy. He was beginning to see in addition that the temper he encouraged was particularly obnoxious to the policy he adopted. And although his purpose in mounting horse after yesterday frowning on his bride was definite, and might be deemed sagacious, he bemoaned already the fatality pushing him even farther from her in chase of a satisfaction impossible to grasp. But the bare fact that her behaviour demanded a line of policy crossed the grain of his temper. It was very offensive. Considering that she wounded him severely, her reversal of their proper parts, by taking the part belonging to him, and requiring his watchfulness, and the careful dealings he was accustomed to expect from others, and had a right to exact of her, was injuriously unjust. The feelings of a man hereditarily sensitive to property, accused her of a trespassing imprudence; and knowing himself, by testimony of his household, his tenants, and the neighbourhood, and the world as well, amiable when he received his dues, he contemplated her with an air of stiff-backed ill-treatment, not devoid of a certain sanctification of martyrdom. His bitterest enemy would hardly declare that it was he who was in the wrong. Clara herself had never been audacious enough to say that. Distaste of his person was inconceivable to the favourite of society. The capricious creature probably wanted a whipping to bring her to the understanding of the principle called mastery, which is in man. But was he administering it? If he retained a hold on her, he could undoubtedly apply the scourge at leisure, any kind of scourge. He could shun her, look on her frigidly, unbend to her to find a warmer place for sarcasm, pityingly smile, ridicule, pay court elsewhere. He could do these things if he retained a hold on her. And he could do them well, because of the faith he had in his renowned amiability; for in doing them he could feel that he was other than he seemed, and his own cordial nature was there to comfort him while he bestowed punishment. Cordial indeed! The chills he endured were flung from the world. His heart was in that fiction. Half the hearts now beating have a mild form of it to keep them merry, and the chastisement he desired to inflict was really no more than righteous vengeance for an offended goodness of heart. Clara, figuratively, absolutely perhaps, on her knees, he would raise her and forgive her. He yearned for the situation, to let her understand how little she had known him. It would be worth the pain she had dealt, to pour forth the stream of re-established confidences, to paint himself to her as he was in the spirit, not as he was to the world, though the world had reason to do him honour. First, however, she would have to be humbled. Something whispered that his hold on her was lost. In such case, every blow he struck would set her flying farther, till the breach between them would be past bridging. Determination not to let her go was the best finish to this perpetually revolving round which went like the same old wheel planks of a water-mill in his head at a review of the injury he sustained. He had come to it before, and he came to it again. There was his vengeance. It melted him. She was so sweet. She shone for him like the sunny breeze on water. Thinking of her caused a catch of his breath. The dreadful young woman had a keener edge for the senses of men than sovereign beauty. It would be madness to let her go. She affected him like an outlook on the great Patterne estate after an absence, when his welcoming flag wept for pride above Patterne Hall. It would be treason to let her go. It would be cruelty to her. He was bound to reflect that she was of tender age, and the foolishness of the wretch was excusable to extreme youth. We toss away a flower that we are tired of smelling and do not wish to carry, but the rose, young woman, is not cast off with impunity. A fiend in shape of man is always behind us to appropriate her. He that touches that rejected thing is larcenous. Willoughby had been sensible of it in the person of Laetitia, and by all the more that Clara's charms exceeded the faded creature's, he felt it now. 10,000 furies thickened about him at the thought of her lying by the roadside without his having crushed all bloom and odour out of her, which might tempt even the curiosity of the fiend, man. On the other hand, supposing her to be there untouched, universally declined by the sniffling, sagacious dog fiend, a miserable spinster for years, he could conceive notions of his remorse. A soft remorse may be adopted as an agreeable sensation within view of the wasted penitent whom we have struck a trifle too hard. Seeing her penitent, he certainly would be willing to surround her with little offices of compromising kindness. It would depend on her age. Supposing her still youngish, there might be captivating passages between them, as thus, in a style not unfamiliar.
"And was it my fault, my poor girl? Am I to blame, that you have passed a lonely, unloved youth?"
No, Willoughby, the irreparable error was mine. The blame is mine, mine only. I live to repent it. I do not seek, for I have not deserved your pardon. Had I it, I should need my own self-esteem to presume to clasp it to a bosom ever unworthy of you.
"I may have been impatient, Clara. We are human."
Never be it mine to accuse one of whom I laid so heavy a weight of forbearance.
"Still, my old love, for I am merely quoting history in naming you so, I cannot have been perfectly blameless."
To me you were, and are.
"Clara!"
Willoughby!"
"Must I recognise the bitter truth that we two, once nearly one, so nearly one, are eternally separated?"
I have envisaged it. My friend, I may call you friend. You have ever been my friend, my best friend. Oh, that eyes had been mine to know the friend I had! Willoughby, in the darkness of night, and during days that were as night to my soul, I have seen the inexorable finger pointing my solitary way through the wilderness from a paradise forfeited by my most wilful, my wanton sin. We have met. It is more than I have merited. We part. In mercy, let it be for ever. O terrible word! Coined by the passions of our youth, it comes to us for our sole riches when we are bankrupt of earthly treasures, and is the passport given by abnegation unto woe that prays to quit this probationary sphere. Willoughby, we part. It is better so.
"Clara, one only, one last, one holy kiss."
If these poor lips, that once were sweet to you. The kiss, to continue the language of the imaginative composition of this time, favourite readings in which had inspired Sir Willoughby with a colloquy so pathetic, was imprinted. Ay, she had the kiss, and no mean one. It was intended to swallow every vestige of dwindling attractiveness out of her, and there was a bit of scandal springing of it in the background that satisfactorily settled her business, and left her enshrined in memory, a divine recollection to him, as his popular romances would say, and have said for years. Unhappily, the fancied salute of her lips encircled him with a breathing Clara. She rushed up from vacancy like a wind summoned to wreck a stately vessel. His reverie had thrown him into severe commotion. The slave of a passion thinks in a ring, as hares run. He will cease where he began. Her sweetness had set him off. and he whirled back to her sweetness.
And that being incalculable and he insatiable.
You have the picture of his torments when you consider that her behaviour made her as a cloud to him. Riding slack, horse and man, in the likeness of those two a jog homeward from the miry hunt, the horse pricked his ears, and Willoughby looked down from his road along the bills on the race headed by young Crossjay, with a short start over Aspenwell Common to the ford. There was no mistaking who they were, though they were well nigh a mile distant below. He noticed that they did not overtake the boy. They drew rein at the ford, talking not simply face to face, but face in face. Willoughby's novel feeling of he knew not what drew them up to him, enabling him to fancy them bathing in one another's eyes. Then she sprang through the ford, De Craye following, but not close after. And why not close? She had flicked him with one of her peremptorily saucy speeches when she was bold with the gallop. They were not unknown to Willoughby. They signified intimacy. Last night he had proposed to De Craye to take Miss Middleton for a ride the next afternoon. It never came to his mind then that he and his friend had formerly been rivals. He wished Clara to be amused. Policy dictated that every thread should be used to attach her to her residence at the Hall, until he could command his temper to talk to her calmly, and overwhelm her, as any man in earnest, with command of temper and a point of vantage, may be sure to whelm a young woman. Policy, adulterated by temper, yet policy it was that had sent him on his errand in the early morning, to beat about for a house and garden suitable to Dr. Middleton, within a circuit of 5, 6, or 7 miles of Patterne Hall. If the Reverend Doctor liked the house and took it, and Willoughby had seen the place to suit him, the neighbourhood would be a chain upon Clara. And if the house did not please a gentleman rather hard to please, except in a venerable wine, an excuse would have been started for his visiting other houses, and he had that response to his importunate daughter, that he believed an excellent house was on view. Dr. Middleton had been prepared by numerous hints to meet Clara's black misreading of a lovers' quarrel, so that everything looked full of promise as far as Willoughby's exercise of policy went. But the strange pang traversing him now convicted him of a large adulteration of profitless temper with it. The loyalty of De Craye to a friend, where a woman walked in the drama, was notorious. It was there, and a most flexible thing it was, and it soon resembled reason manipulated by the sophists. Not to have reckoned on his peculiar loyalty was proof of the blindness cast on us by temper. And De Craye had an Irish tongue, and he had it under control, so that he could talk good sense and airy nonsense at discretion. The strongest overboiling of English Puritan contempt of a gabbler would not stop women from liking it. Evidently Clara did like it, and Willoughby thundered on her sex. Unto such brainless things as these do we, under the irony of circumstances, confide our honour. For he was no gabbler. He remembered having rattled in earlier days. He had rattled with an object to gain, desiring to be taken for an easy, careless, vivacious, charming fellow, as any young gentleman may be who gaily wears the golden dish of £50,000 per annum, nailed to the back of his very saintly young pate. The growth of the critical spirit in him, however, had informed him that slang had been a principal component of his rattling, and as he justly supposed it a betraying art for his race and for him. He passed through the prim and the yawning phases of affected indifference to the pine puritanism of a leaden contempt of gabblers.
They snare women, you see, girls. How despisable! The host of girls, at least that girl below there.
Married women understood him. Widows did. He placed an exceedingly handsome and flattering young widow of his acquaintance, Lady Mary Lewison, beside Clara for a comparison. Involuntarily, and at once, in a flash, in despite of him, he would rather it had been otherwise, and in despite of Lady Mary's high birth and connections as well, the silver lustre of the maid sicklied the poor widow. The effect of the luckless comparison was to produce an image of surpassingness in the features of Clara that gave him the final, or mace blow. Jealousy invaded him. He had hitherto been free of it, regarding jealousy as a foreign devil, the accursed familiar of the vulgar. Luckless fellows might be victims of the disease. He was not. And neither Captain Oxford, nor Vernon, nor De Craye, nor any of his compeers had given him one shrewd pinch. The woman had, not the man, and she in quite a different fashion from his present wallowing anguish. She had never pulled him to earth's level, where jealousy gnaws the grasses. He had boasted himself above the humiliating visitation. If that had been the case, we should not have needed to trouble ourselves much about him. A run or two with a pack of imps would have satisfied us. But he desired Clara Middleton manfully enough at an intimation of rivalry to be jealous. In a minute the foreign devil had him. He was flame, flaming verdigris. One might almost dare to say, for an exact illustration, such was actually the colour, but accept it as unsaid. Remember the poets upon jealousy. It is to be haunted in the heaven of two by a third, preceded or succeeded, therefore surrounded, embraced, bugged by this infernal third. It is love's bed of burning marl, to see and taste the withering third in the bosom of sweetness, to be dragged through the past and find the fair Eden of its sulphurous, to be dragged to the gates of the future and glory to behold them blood, to adore the bitter creature trebly, and with treble power to clutch her by the windpipe. It is to be cheated, derided, shamed, and abject, and supplicating, and consciously demoniacal in treacherousness, and victoriously self-justified in revenge. And still there is no change in what men feel, though in what they do the modern may be judicious. You know the many paintings of man transformed to raging beast by the curse, and this the fieriest trial of our egoism, worked in the Egoist to produce division of himself from himself, a concentration of his thoughts upon another object, still himself, but in another breast, which had to be looked at and into for the discovery of him. By the gaping jaw chasm of his greed we may gather comprehension of his insatiate force of jealousy. Let her go? Not though he were to become a mark of public scorn in strangling her with a joke. His concentration was marvellous. Unused to the exercise of imaginative powers, he nevertheless conjured her before him visually till his eyeballs ached. He saw none but Clara, hated none, loved none, save the intolerable woman. What logic was in him deduced her to be individual and most distinctive from the circumstance that only she had ever wrought these pangs. She had made him ready for them, as we know. An idea of De Craye being no stranger to her when he arrived at the Hall dashed him at De Craye for a second. It might be or might not be that they had a secret. Clara was the spell. So prodigiously did he love and hate, that he had no permanent sense except for her. The soul of him writhed under her eyes at one moment, and the next it closed on her without mercy. She was his possession escaping, his own gliding away to the third. There would be pangs for him too, that third. Standing at the altar to see her fast bound, soul and body, to another, would be good roasting fire. It would be good roasting fire for her too, should she be averse. To conceive her aversion was to burn her and devour her. She would then be his. What say you? Burned and devoured. Rivals would vanish then. Her reluctance to espouse the man she was plighted to would cease to be uttered, cease to be felt. At last he believed in her reluctance. All that had been wanted to bring him to the belief was the scene on the common. Such a mere spark, or an imagined spark. But the presence of the third was necessary, otherwise he would have had to suppose himself personally distasteful. Women have us back to the conditions of primitive man, or they shoot us higher than the topmost star. But it is as we please. Let them tell us what we are to them. For us, they are our back and front of life. The poet's Lesbia, the poet's Beatrice, ours is the choice. And were it proved that some of the bright things are in the pay of darkness, with the stamp of his coin on their palms, and that some are the very angels we hear sung of, not the less might we say that they find us out. They have us by our leanings. They are to us what we hold of best or worst within. By their state is our civilization judged. And if it is hugely animal still, that is because primitive men abound and will have their pasture. Since the lead is ours, the leaders must bow their heads to the sentence. Jealousy of a woman is the primitive egoism, seeking to refine in a blood gone to savagery under apprehension of an invasion of rights. It is in action the tiger threatened by a rifle when his paw is rigid on quick flesh. He tears the flesh for rage at the intruder. The Egoist, who is our original male in giant form, had no bleeding victim beneath his paw, but there was the sex to mangle. Much as he prefers the well-behaved among women, who can worship and fawn, and in whom terror can be inspired, in his wrath he would make of Beatrice a Lesbia quadrantaria. Let women tell us of their side of the battle. We are not so much the test of the Egoist in them as they to us. Movements of similarity shown in crowned and undiademed ladies of intrepid independence suggest their occasional capacity to be like men when it is given to them to hunt. At present they fly, and there is the difference. Our manner of the chase informs them of the creature we are. Dimly as young women are informed, they have a youthful ardour of detestation that renders them less tolerant of the Egoist than their perceptive elder sisters. What they do perceive, however, they have a redoubtable grasp of, and Clara's behaviour would be indefensible if her detective feminine vision might not sanction her acting on its direction. Seeing him as she did, she turned from him and shunned his house as the antre of an ogre. She had posted her letter to Lucy Dalton. Otherwise, if it had been open to her to dismiss Colonel De Craye, she might, with a warm kiss to Vernon's pupil, have seriously thought of the next shrill steam whistle across yonder hills, for a travelling companion on the way to her friend Lucy. So abhorrent was to her the putting of her horse's head toward the hall. Oh, the breaking of bread there! It had to be gone through for another day or more, that is to say, 40 hours, it might be 46 hours, and no prospect of sleep to speed any of them on wings. Such were Clara's inward interjections, while poor Willoughby burned himself out with verdigris flame, having the savour of bad metal, till the hollow of his breast was not unlike to a corroded old cuirass, found, we will assume, by criminal lantern beams in a digging beside green-mantled pools of the sullen soil, lumped with a strange adhesive concrete. How else picture the sad man? The cavity felt empty to him, and heavy, sick of an ancient and mortal combat, and burning, deeply dinted too, with a starry hole, whence fled the soul, very sore, important for aught save sluggish agony, a specimen, and the issue of strife. Measurelessly to loathe was not sufficient to save him from pain. He tried it. Nor to despise. He went to a depth there also. The fact that she was a healthy young woman returned to the surface of his thoughts, like the murdered body pitched into the river, which will not drown, and calls upon the elements of dissolution to float it. His grand hereditary desire to transmit his estates, wealth, and name to a solid posterity, while it prompted him in his loathing and contempt of a nature mean and ephemeral compared with his, attached him desperately to her splendid healthiness. The council of elders, whose descendant he was, pointed to this young woman for his mate. He had wooed her with the idea that they consented. Oh, she was healthy, and he likewise; but, as if it had been a duel between two clearly designated by quality of blood to bid a house endure, she was the first who taught him what it was to have sensations of his mortality. He could not forgive her. It seemed to him consequently politic to continue frigid and let her have a further taste of his shadow, when it was his burning wish to strain her in his arms to a flatness provoking his compassion.
You have had your ride?
He addressed her politely in the general assembly on the lawn. "I have had my ride, yes," Clara replied.
Agreeable, I trust?
"Very agreeable." So it appeared. Oh, blushless! The next instant he was in conversation with Laetitia, questioning her upon a dejected droop of her eyelashes. "I am, I think," said she, "constitutionally melancholy." He murmured to her,
I believe in the existence of specifics, and not far to seek, for all our ailments, except those we bear at the hands of others.
She did not dissent. De Craye, whose humour for being convinced that Willoughby cared about as little for Miss Middleton as she for him, was nourished by his immediate observation of them, dilated on the beauty of the ride and his fair companion's equestrian skill.
You should start a travelling circus, Willoughby rejoined. But the idea is a worthy one. There's another alternative to the expedition I proposed, Miss Middleton, said De Craye. And I be clown? I haven't a scruple of objection. I must read up books of jokes. Don't, said Willoughby. I'd spoil my part. But a natural clown won't keep up an artificial performance for an entire month, you see, which is the length of time we propose. He'll exhaust his nature in a day, and be bowled over by the dullest regular donkey engine with paint on his cheeks and a nodding topknot. What is this expedition we propose?
De Craye was advised in his heart to spare Miss Middleton any allusion to honeymoons.
Merely a game to cure dulness." "Ah,"
Willoughby acquiesced.
"a month, you said?"
"One'd like it to last for years."
"Ah, you're driving one of Mr. Merriman's witticisms at me, Horace. I'm dense."
Willoughby bowed to Dr. Middleton, and drew him from Vernon, filially taking his turn to talk with him closely. De Craye saw Clara's look as her father and Willoughby went aside thus linked. It lifted him over anxieties and casuistries concerning loyalty. Powder was in the look to make a war horse breathe high and shiver for the signal. End of Chapter 23. Read by Lars Rolander.